Welcome to the Thinking Legal podcast with me, David Kerner. This is a podcast about the human and psychological aspects of the legal sector. I run The Marketing Legal, a legal marketing agency, and you can find us at www.themarketinglegal.com. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we're talking with Connie Dalziel, who is one of the co-chairs of the Legal Neurodiversity Network, which, in its own words, is a fast-growing network of neurodivergent employees, partners, and allies working in the UK legal sector, which strives to improve the experience of neurodivergent employees by sharing good practices that are being deployed by law firms and producing new ideas that will embrace inclusion and widen diversity. So welcome, Connie.
Thank you.
Let's start by asking kind of you to talk about your journey into law and why you decided to become a lawyer.
So I trod a very traditional route into law. I studied a law degree at Durham University, graduating in 2019. I also did a vacation scheme at my current firm, Pinsent Masons, in the summer of 2019. And for those who don't know what that is, a vacation scheme is basically a couple of weeks of work experience at a law firm that often comes with interviews for a training contract. So that's a very traditional route of kind of becoming a solicitor and joining the profession and doing it that way, so that you get some experience. And after that vacation scheme, I was awarded a training contract to start in 2021, which meant that I had a year between graduating from Durham and starting the legal practice course in September 2020. I know that the legal practice course is currently being phased out and being replaced by the SQE. So in between that time, I was a paralegal for a short while at Clifford Chance in their Newcastle office, then commenced my training contract at Pinsent in 2021, and I did 4 seats, and a seat is basically a 6-month stint in a different department, so that trainees get a wide range of experience in different areas of law. So I did 4 seats. I did a seat in corporate, IP, real estate disputes and employment. I then qualified into the IP team in September 2023, so I'm now coming up to 1 year qualified. And I decided to become an IP lawyer because I think it's such an interesting area of law. So IP is concerned with protecting the rights of those who innovate, invent, and create. So we're always at the forefront of cutting edge technologies, and we work with really interesting clients. And we do a lot of work in the AI space as well, which is super interesting.
Yeah, it sounds great, actually. You were diagnosed with autism kind of into your career. So perhaps you could talk about your path to diagnosis and the impact that had on your life and career.
Yeah, so kind of going back right to the beginning, I'd always struggled with my mental health as a teenager and just sort of generally struggled behind the scenes, like kind of finding social interactions really difficult, really exhausting, having what, in hindsight are now meltdowns at home and kind of hiding everything at school. So it all kind of came out at home. And I remember kind of bouncing between 5 different sort of therapists who could never seem to pinpoint why I was struggling so much. And I knew I was sort of, my brain works differently in some way, but I didn't know why. And for the longest time, I just assumed that I was broken. And at the same time, I was just sort of muddling through school and university. And I'd always performed very well academically. I was a member of all these clubs and societies at school. I was in 3 choirs. I was grade 8 on piano and singing, part of the debating society, winning all these subject prizes. So, my parents, who are of a generation where mental health and neurodiversity weren't really talked about, they just assumed I was doing okay because I was doing so well at school. And I guess I thought that as well. And I thought that as long as I was succeeding academically or in my career, that was all that mattered. And a lot of my self-worth was tied up in that as well. And I then started going down the autism diagnosis route in the summer of 2021. And that was a period of significant transition for me because I just completed my LPC and I was getting ready to move to Leeds with my husband to start my training contract at Pinsent. And I'd paralegaled for a bit before this point, like I said, but my training contract really was my first kind of big serious job. And it was the first time that I'd lived away from home and lived just with my husband in our own place. And I remember really struggling to get used to that significant life transition. And all of a sudden doing well academically or in my career wasn't really enough anymore. And even though I was doing really well on my training contract and getting, really good feedback from all my supervisors, I remember just feeling absolutely poleaxed by exhaustion behind the scenes and feeling completely adrift and out of my depth. And the coping mechanisms that I'd used throughout my life were no longer working. And again, everything was kind of coming out at home because I was having to mask it all at work in order to do well. And in hindsight, it really doesn't surprise me that I went down the diagnosis route at this point in my life, as I know a lot of late diagnosed adults, particularly women, they get diagnosed during significant life transitions after low-level struggling for much of their life. For example, going to university, moving house, starting a new job like me, having children, or menopause, for example. So autistic individuals can really struggle with periods of transition if we don't receive adequate support. So I started the diagnosis process itself in November 2021, and I went down the NHS route as it wasn't covered by my workplace health insurance at the time. The whole process took 11 months, which is, it's not the quickest time, but I suppose the NHS, that's quite good, because I've heard of some horror stories in some parts of the country. You're on a waiting list for 4 or 5 years. And I was finally diagnosed as autistic in October 2022, which was halfway through my Pinsent's training contract. And I remember that the diagnosis was just a huge relief, and I felt like I'd finally been handed a torch after years of fumbling around in the dark looking for answers. And I finally understood why I was different and why I'd been struggling behind the scenes for all those years, while simultaneously, being a high achiever in school or my career. And I was finally able to reconcile those two things. And I wasn't broken, I was just different. And in terms of the effect the diagnosis had on my life and career, my husband was very supportive and pleased. I think he was just relieved that he finally had an answer for my behaviours as well, and that he had the tools that he needed to support me. But I remember initially having a less than positive reaction from some family members. And I suppose, again, they're just from a generation where this sort of thing wasn't really talked about, and autism was stigmatised and considered only in the context of like learning disabilities, for example, as opposed to an alternative way in which one's brain functions. And they told me that I shouldn't disclose the diagnosis at work because it would be a black mark against me and I would be discriminated against. And I understand that concern, because they're only looking out for me and they care about me, but it just reminded me that the stigma against autism and other neurodivergent conditions, unfortunately, still exists, even if we have come a long way since those family members were my age. And I guess that's what spurred me on to take the first step, to tentatively disclose to my line manager at the time. And thankfully, his reaction was positive, and he went out of his way to put me in touch with the Pinsent Masons Neurodiversity Network and provide me with that support, which was really invaluable at that time. And I then started disclosing to the rest of the team, who were equally supportive and even curious about it and just wanted to learn more. And then that initial positive reaction internally finally spurred me on to go public with my diagnosis in a Legal Cheek article in December 2022. And I was just absolutely blown away by the positive response from both colleagues who'd read the article and also just complete strangers on the internet.
Yes.
So, yeah, those family members could not have been more wrong. And ever since the Legal Cheek article, my being open about my autism has only opened more doors to opportunities to get involved with so many amazing panel events, roundtables, networks and initiatives. And I've since become co-chair of the Pinsent Neurodiversity Network. And as you said, I'm co-chair of the LNN. I've also contributed to the government Buckland Review in Autism Employment. I've spoken at many different panel events, both virtual and in person. I've both shared my own story and heard the stories of so many others. And that's been one of the most positive things arising from my diagnosis. I've built an entire network of other neurodivergent individuals and allies working in the legal profession whom I didn't even know existed before I went public with my diagnosis. And that network has been absolutely invaluable and reminded me that I'm not alone.
Amazing. It sounds like a really positive experience, actually. And in terms of the current situation for neurodivergent lawyers, is there much visibility, and what are the challenges that neurodivergent people in the industry face?
I think it largely depends on the law firm and its culture. So Pinsent's has been, absolutely fantastic at supporting me, both as an individual by implementing reasonable adjustments, and also as a law firm, just generally participating in the neurodiversity conversation. So, for example, they have their own neurodiversity network, which I've already mentioned, and this network is very well attended and active. And the law firm Pinsent is also a partner in the LNN as well. And as I said, this is all down to a law firm's culture, and Pinsent's has a famously friendly culture. But as the saying goes, a law firm's culture is made up of its people. So individuals working within a law firm need to accept, accommodate, and celebrate neurodivergent colleagues consistently in order for that to filter down to the general culture of the firm. And in terms of visibility, there's still, I mean, it's getting better, but I would say there probably isn't still a great deal, which is why I'm concerned that there's still stigma pervading the legal profession. And I can count on one hand the number of openly neurodivergent fee earners at Pinsent's. There are more neurodivergent staff in non-fee earning roles, which I think is interesting. And I find that sort of replicated outside of Pinsent's in terms of visibility as well. And I know only a handful of openly autistic solicitors across the industry as a whole. Visibility is much better in the junior echelons of the profession, but there's very little representation in the senior ranks, and there absolutely needs to be more there, so that junior lawyers have role models to look up to. And I think that might be because senior leaders are from a generation where people didn't tend to disclose these things because they were worried that it would affect their career negatively. But I'm willing to bet that there are neurodivergent senior lawyers out there, given that 1 in 7 of the UK population is neurodivergent. So I'm hoping as the years go by, the juniors who are open about their neurodivergence now will eventually filter into those senior positions and become that senior representation that we so desperately need. And in terms of the challenges, I think educating others is a big one, because if people are educated on neurodiversity, then it's much easier for them to accommodate neurodivergent individuals and understand the reasons why those accommodations are so important. And then that also shifts the burden away from us as neurodivergent individuals constantly having to advocate for ourselves as well. And educated individuals can then make an environment which is neurodivergent friendly. Again, it's the point about how law firm culture is effectively made up of its people. But education can be a real hurdle, as unfortunately some people just switch off when they hear things like this. And it's about targeting the right people as well. For example, the people with the power to make these adjustments, like line managers, and ensuring the message gets through. Often with neurodiversity networks, as valuable as they are, we're preaching to the choir, which can be quite frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, and and kind of education is definitely an important component. And I know this is quite a subjective question, but what kind of adjustments could or should firms be making for neurodivergent lawyers and staff? And I know you have an interesting perspective on this.
Yeah, so in terms of my personal adjustments, that's things like noise cancelling headphones, because we work in an open plan office, which can be quite overstimulating and distracting, which means that when I need to do kind of deep focused tasks, it can be quite difficult to do that. So noise cancelling headphones just sort of blocks that out, or having like a quiet room to go to do kind of more in-depth work. Having a fixed desk, because I know that a lot of law firms say hot desk, and that unpredictability can be quite stressful for someone who's autistic. So I think having a fixed desk helps, being able to work flexibly and things like that. But I think more widely, the conversation shouldn't actually be about what adjustments firms should make for their neurodivergent lawyers, because I believe in what's known as inclusion by design, which is basically when a law firm implements inclusive practices for everyone as part of its culture and operating model. And that's a better approach, I think, for a number of reasons. Firstly, it might be that making adjustments specifically for neurodivergent individuals, they might feel like that unfairly singles them out, and they can feel like they're receiving unfair treatment compared to others. Again, that might be related to the kind of the pervasive stigma that still exists, which is why it's really important that we break that down. Secondly, as I've already said, an estimated 1 in 7 of the UK population is neurodivergent, and that's quite a significant minority. So statistically, there will be at least some individuals in a law firm who are neurodivergent, and it might be that those individuals are undiagnosed, but they might just be exploring a diagnosis, and therefore they don't know at that point what adjustments they might need, or they might not wish to disclose for whatever reason. And then a law firm being inclusive by design helps those individuals, as the burden is no longer on them to disclose. So steps to make a law firm inclusive by design, include implementing the following things by default to allowing flexible home working, having quiet decompression spaces in the office, having separate quiet rooms during networking events, drafting clear agendas for meetings and sticking to meeting timings where possible, avoiding bright lights and garish decor in the office, and offering assistive tech as standard. And to be honest, a lot of those measures will probably help neurotypical employees as well.
Yes, exactly. And now let's talk about the Legal Neurodiversity Network. So you're co-chair. So you're in a good position to tell us what it does and why you decided to become a co-chair of the network, and also the wider importance of industry-wide networks.
Yes, so as you very eloquently put it at the beginning of the podcast, the Legal Neurodiversity Network is a fast-growing network of neurodivergent employees, partners and allies working in the legal profession, and we strive to improve the experience of neurodivergent individuals by sharing good practices that are already being deployed in law firms and by producing new ideas as well. And the network is currently made up of over 55 organisations, and it's growing as member organisations, which include all the Magic Circle firms. That includes the Law Societies of England and Wales and of Scotland as well. Includes Lexic, and it also includes Neurodiversity in Law, which is a separate legal kind of neurodiversity organisation. We also have in-house legal departments of non-legal services companies and bodies as members of the network as well. And the LNN is only just coming up to around 2 years old, but it's already achieved so much in that time. So we've contributed to the Sir Robert Buckland Autism and Employment Review, which we've already mentioned. We've released our own report on recommendations for employers and how they can support neurodivergent individuals as well, which is almost a year in the making. And that's a really kind of valuable one-stop shop for any employer that might not know where to start on implementing kind of reasonable adjustments or indeed inclusion by design. That's a really, really useful resource. And we've also held countless neuro-inclusive socials and networking events at a variety of law firms, and we often get law firms kind of jumping at the chance to host us as well, which is really nice to see. I wanted to become co-chair of the LNN because at the time when the co-chair vacancies opened, the network had grown so much since the start, and at that point it now had national reach. And that was why we introduced the co-chairs, because that was part of a kind of introducing a wider governance structure, because the network was just growing so quickly. And prior to that, we'd just been a collection of members who met on a call once a month, and co-founder James Smither, he was having to do everything himself. So we realised that it was kind of growing too big for him to do that. And so we needed a formal structure with co-chairs and different committees, like an events committee, a social media committee, campaigns committee, etc. And I really realised that national reach would be a really good opportunity to occupy kind of a national platform and be as visible as possible as an autistic solicitor. And as I've said before, visibility of autistic solicitors isn't as good as it could be, and it does need to improve. But it's not just about me. I wanted to be co-chair so I could be involved in all the amazing LNN initiatives in a more formal capacity and help the network grow even more. And industry-wide networks are really important because they allow neurodivergent individuals to build connections that go beyond those within their own employer, and that's been the real advantage for me. I've met so many other individuals working in the legal profession via LNN who aren't at Pinsent, as well as many committed allies. And as I mentioned before, such networks can be a real source of support. And given that either everyone in those networks is either neurodivergent themselves or has kind of first-hand experience of it, they understand the unique challenges of us and neurodivergent individuals. And not only that, but we also all celebrate each other's professional and personal successes as well, and we help cultivate a really kind of positive and happy space.
Yeah, that's a great thing to have. And as you already mentioned, you're also a member of and co-chair of the Pinsent Masons Neurodiversity Network. So perhaps you could speak about the role that firm networks also play for neurodivergent individuals.
So firm networks are really a first point of contact for those within a firm who may have been recently diagnosed. They might be questioning a diagnosis, or kind of exploring a diagnosis. They might be caring for neurodivergent individuals at home, or it might just be for those who are just interested or curious and they want to be an ally or learn more. And the Pinsent Neurodiversity Network was my first point of contact when I was initially diagnosed and when I initially disclosed to my line manager. And as part of that first point of contact, I was able to connect with like-minded, in some cases, literally individuals from the very start who could provide that further support that I needed at that very early stage. We have meetings every 6 weeks where we all update one another on various neurodiversity-related initiatives and events that we've attended, both inside and outside the firm. And the meetings are also just a good opportunity to have a chat and a moan, to be honest. We also have some smaller virtual coffee groups set up for various neurodivergent conditions such as autism, ADHD and dyslexia for more informal private chats and catch-ups as well. And firm networks can also offer really useful resources such as assistance in requesting reasonable adjustments in assistive tech. So we've got kind of a template list of suggested adjustments, which is really useful for those who kind of might have only just been newly diagnosed, or they might not know exactly what adjustments they need. So it can be a really useful prompt. We also provide line manager and employee training on neurodiversity. We assist with diagnosis pathways, and we can also be a gateway to attending and organising interesting and educational panel events, both within and outside the firm.
Excellent. I think maybe to wrap us up, maybe you could kind of talk about what the LNN has in the pipeline this year, and what are the kind of interesting things that you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we've got some really interesting events coming up. We've got a kind of clinic style event coming up at Herbert Smith Freehills on the 25th of June, which was an event kind of organised off the back of the publication of our report of recommendations that itself came out of an event at Linklaters last year, a roundtable event where we got a load of neurodivergent individuals and allies together in a big room to discuss kind of what was working well at their firm for supporting these people, what they wanted to see, etc., and then basically putting all that into a report. And yeah, the clinic event is basically just going to be kind of elaborating on what was in that report. So kind of embedding neuro-inclusion within teams, taking a strategic approach to neurodiversity and adjustment policies and commitments. And each of those 3 topics is going to be in a sort of clinic, as it were, and people can kind of go between each one and dip in and out of the discussions, basically. So that'll be really good. We've also got an event in Leeds in July, which I'm helping to organise. That's on the 23rd of July at Addleshaw Goddard's Leeds office. And it was partly because a lot of our stuff is in London. So it'd be nice. It's been really good to see some more regional events. We did have one in Birmingham in January, and we kind of want to continue things in the regional vein. And that's going to be a really interesting event because that's on AI and neurodiversity. So as I said at the beginning, I do a lot of AI work just as part of my day job, but I think it's really interesting it'll be interesting to explore how AI and neurodiversity intersect. So we'll be discussing, we've got some kind of assistive tech and tech specialists who are going to be joining that, who'll be discussing kind of how AI can assist neurodivergent individuals. And also we'll be discussing how it might negatively affect them as well, for example, with biased data leading to kind of biased outcomes. And that's kind of a real concern, I think, with AI. So that'll be really interesting. And then we've got a summer social at Gately. I think Gately's London office on the 8th of August. That's going to be like a networking event. But all our networking events, we make sure to make them really neuro-inclusive, sending out an invitation with a clear agenda, clear instructions of how to get to the building. Sometimes we put like actual kind of photos on the invitation and like a picture of like the doorway and what the atrium of the building looks like, for example, so people know exactly where to go, because especially, well, at least speaking from my own experience, it can be quite stressful going to a new place and not knowing kind of where to go, for example. So we make sure to include that. We'll have like quiet rooms, things like that. So all our networking events, we make sure those are really inclusive. And then in October, I think we're organising it's kind of amorphous right now. I think this one is probably the furthest away event, but it's definitely in the pipeline. It's going to be a kind of parent-carer event, and specifically a panel event focused on parents and individuals who care for neurodivergent individuals, and and their experiences. So yeah, we've got some really exciting stuff in the pipeline.
Sounds great. And while I was at I helped organise an event that you guys had on the roof of the building, which was seemed really great. So if people want to get involved with the LNN, how do they go about doing that?
We have a LinkedIn page, I think, which has some contact details on it. Alternatively, you can just find me on LinkedIn because I'm a co-chair. Just message me and I will direct you to James Smither, who is our memberships and partnerships lead, and he deals with kind of onboarding new members, both in terms of law firms who want to join in their law firm capacity or people who just want to join in their individual capacity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Connie. It was great to have you on, and I hope everything goes well with the LNN. It sounds like you're doing a lot at the moment, and it sounds like good work.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.